Hi, today I have here with me Gupta, Director at APRW, a Singapore-based integrated communications agency. So she's going to talk about APRW's expansion into Indonesia. Welcome.
Thank you,
So my
Feroz.
first question is, why did APRW choose Indonesia as its first overseas market for expansion?
Thank you, Feroz. Thanks for inviting APRW and me, to have this chat with at Gully. Before I answer your question, I'll take a step back to really talk about the history and the journey of APRW, over the last 29 years. So again, to be, very wholeheartedly to share with everyone, we are one of the oldest integrated communications agency, which is locally owned and headquartered in Singapore. This is our 28th year, in operations. And of course, over this 28-year history, we have had to evolve ourselves as the industry has evolved, upskill ourselves, bring in new services for clients. And again, I think that's the success of what has really led APRW through this journey over almost 3 decades now. As a locally owned agency, of course, a lot of the work that we do is based out of Singapore. Our clients are based out of Singapore. But in the last decade, again, known to a lot of us based here in Singapore, that the region, which is Southeast Asia, is a highly integrated region. These are some of the largest consumer markets that operate in the region, for companies. And it's very natural for them to move into these markets. We started work in the whole startup tech sector close to a decade ago when, Singapore was really kind of coming up as the startup hub in Southeast Asia. We saw a lot of our clients who were, expanding into these markets. And naturally, they would come and give us this work and say that, can you continue to drive my work into markets like Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, and Indonesia. And I think this was a starting point for us in terms of where and how we started to go into the regional markets, form partnerships, start to work with agencies there, and continue to drive the strategy and narrative for our clients into the regional markets. Indonesia is the largest startup hub in Southeast Asia. All of us know that. And a lot of that work was really going into Indonesia. So between 2017 and 2019, we did use a lot of the helicopter approach where we would fly in, do work, and go back to Singapore. But I think in that journey, it opened a lot of other doors for us, where we realized that, yes, there are a lot of Indonesian companies who want communication mandates to be done in Singapore. And a lot of Singaporean companies, apart from startups, also who are expanding into Indonesia. And this is the largest business corridor between in this region. So I think it was a very organic decision that led us eventually to set up this office in Indonesia out of Jakarta. And we were very lucky to be supported by Enterprise Singapore, which is a government statutory body here, who encourages and supports local SMEs to expand overseas. So all these things put together is what really led us to that journey to set up an office in Jakarta.
So what are some of the challenges that you foresee in Indonesia as you enter the market?
Again, we've been around here for close to 4 years. Not to forget, the first 2 years of being here was in the thick of COVID. So that was a very, very challenging period for us, not just to build our team, but also to build clients, to get ourselves out there, to make friends, all of that. So I would really say in the last 2.5 years, we have, understood this market very well. We understand some of the challenges that companies face as they enter this market because we have done it ourselves. There are language barriers, there are, culture barriers, and like you do business in any market, it's very important to really understand the local culture and the nuances here before you decide to really come in and say that, oh, I want to do business here. So we always tell clients when they come and tell us, oh, I'm expanding into Indonesia, we always tell them that it's very important to first understand Indonesia. And before you really jump into, really start doing business here. So the challenges, like I said, are, again, like any market. It's the size of the country, it's the language, which, can be a challenge. And the third is really about understanding the landscape, and how big Indonesia really is as a market in this region.
Okay, so what are some of the fastest growing sectors in Indonesia from a media and communication standpoint?
Yeah, again, I think it's a great question. In Indonesia, I personally find Indonesia very, very fascinating. In the last decade, it's definitely the technology and the startup sector which has taken dominance here. And it has produced some of the largest and the maximum number of unicorns in Southeast Asia. I think number two is really also about I think it's the DNA in the people, wanting to take a risk, wanting to try something new. That is something that you inherently see in Indonesians here, and a lot of young Indonesians who are ready to try, starting something of their own. So entrepreneurship is really in the blood of Indonesians. Number two is really some of the, when you see the size of Indonesia and the potential that it has, sectors like education, sectors like infrastructure, traditional sectors like steel, mining, copper, paper, all these, again, have been very large industries in Indonesia. So I think it's very interesting to see a lot of traditional Indonesian companies today who are also attempting to go out of Indonesia and do business with the rest of the world, and the entire technology sector, which has really paved the way for the world to also look at Indonesia. So I think that's where there is a two-way process of how Indonesia has opened its doors into the world.
Okay, so you already work in Indonesia with some in Singapore clients. So how are you going to adapt your strategies to cater to the Indonesian markets?
I think it's a great question. And I must say that, we have really taken the last 4 years to understand this market, to understand what are some of our strengths, and what do we really bring to the table. And I must say that I think the niche that we kind of cover and, a part of is really being able to do that cross-border work. And, having a deep understanding of two very interesting countries in this region, which is Singapore and Indonesia, and being able to really locally adapt communication strategies for our clients, either if they are entering Indonesia or they want to talk to the rest of the world through Singapore. So for us, really, as an agency, who has an understanding of this region, who has a deep understanding of Indonesia, for us, the real, I would say, challenge and advantage that we have is we are able to understand the localization of that strategy, and we're able to put it to the best of how the audience can consume it. That's where we come in, as an agency.
So how will you ensure that you stay ahead of local and international competition in Indonesia?
I think it's a good question, but to be very honest with you, I don't think we really thought of our competition, because we were really busy trying to do our own, operations and set ourselves and, find our foot on the ground here. So I think for us, clearly, more than the competition, it was really about finding a niche of how we exist in a market outside Singapore and why we exist there. And Indonesia has really given us that answer, that we are obviously in a state of advantage and in a position where we are able to position ourselves as a regional agency. an agency that really understands this region very well. And the complexities that this region brings along because of the diversity that it comes with, whether it is population sizes, languages spoken, different cultures adopted, all of that. And I believe that for anybody who is really venturing out of Singapore and going into any of these markets, that's the first understanding you need to bring in, that how do you really do business in those markets? What are some of the consumption behaviors which are there? What if it is the media industry, what is the landscape? How do they operate? All of that. So for us, the last 4 years, we have really invested in understanding that in Indonesia and trying to adopt that and be able to educate our clients in their journey, for their expansion here. So seeing all that's there, we really haven't looked at who is competition and, who are we working with and who are we competing with. For us, a lot of our clients are our existing clients in Singapore who are, now in that journey to expand into Indonesia. And again, friends and clients who we know in Indonesia who are keen to work with us in Singapore. So for us, the focus has really been about what we offer, what are we good at, and can we just go and achieve that for our clients.
Okay, so what are the major, some of the trends that you've seen in the Indonesian media and communication market?
So I think for me, the way we have seen the trends, I divided into 2 phases. There is a pre-COVID phase and there's a post-COVID phase. And I think for good or bad, COVID changed a lot of media practices here in Indonesia. And I have felt today that it has definitely made the media far more efficient. And again, I think the biggest amplification that one has seen is the digital penetration, which has happened in Indonesia since COVID happened. I believe that the real Indonesia actually stays outside Jakarta, which is more in the cities like Bandung, Surabaya, Solo, which are also very big media centers. And one has seen how the consumption of news has really changed. And digital has taken predominance here. There is no household today that is not without a smartphone. There is no household today that does not consume news online. And hence the way the media is operating has also changed because news cycles are much shorter. There is 24/7 news turnaround happening here. So which also kind of puts the challenge on the media that you need to keep an eye and keep a lookout for news to ensure that there is periodic updates happening to everything that's going on here. So I think that's one part. And the second part that really is the localization of the news, which is very critical because for any business or any entity, who is doing any kind of media engagement or communication engagement in Indonesia, it's important to realize that there's a whole audience sitting outside Jakarta. And how important is it for you to penetrate deeper into those markets, especially if you're a consumer brand, a consumer tech brand. You cannot focus to just do your engagements in Jakarta. So I think these are the 2 trends that I foresee and see that will really, really ramp up in the next couple of years.
Okay, so all the best for the Indonesian foray, and yeah, that's all the questions I have now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Feroz. Appreciate the time and the effort to speak to us.
Sure, thank you.